Today, Matt Hintz and Ken Schroeder are with us from Portage and Waupaca counties in Wisconsin. Matt built a successful farm business from scratch and was an early adopter of no-till and other soil and water-friendly practices. In a place where his work was a little bit unusual, Matt founded Farmers for Tomorrow, and with the help of Ken, is inviting neighbors to learn together to improve the Tomorrow-Waupaca River, their soil and their drinking water. Welcome, Matt.
Good morning, or afternoon, I guess it is.
And Ken Schroeder is a UW-Wisconsin Extension agriculture agent in Portage County. During the past 6 years, he's dedicated a lot of his time to supporting farmer-led watershed groups, providing grant writing and outreach and technical support, coordination and more for farmers of Mill Creek Watershed Council, Farmers for Tomorrow, and a new group that's developing in that area. So welcome, Ken. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here.
Our agenda today is simple. The three of us will dive into a conversation now, and you can listen carefully for this living story, which is really an exciting one. After that, we'll break into 10-minute small group conversations, as Amy indicated. And after, there'll be very, very short takeaways that we'll share. That brings us to about 2 o'clock, and from 2 to 2:30, we'll just open things up so everyone can ask their own questions of Ken and Matt. And that often is a very, very rich part of this program, so I hope you'll stay around for that. Okay, a couple of big ideas before we dive into this conversation. One is that often, often we hear that it's too expensive, or people wonder if soil health practices can work out financially in a farm operation. And in fact, you'll hear, and I hope you'll listen for how Matt and his family actually built their operation and its financial stability around that. So keep your ears peeled for that. And then also, after doing that, Matt made the decision, after meeting someone else who had done it, and he was inspired to start a local farmer-led group, which leads us to think about leadership. So as you listen today, listen for what it takes to be a leader in a neighborhood group like this. Does a person have to be an extrovert, an organizer, a speaker, a promoter? Look for the internal qualities you see in Matt, and maybe in his stories about others he's met and his local partners, and what makes that initiative actually work. That's where these programs actually started. How do we keep these collaborative things going? So we're going to start today, though, with just a quick look at the watershed. And Ken, I'm hoping that you will just tell us a little bit about the landscape of this river's watershed and the current challenges to the quality of the river and the groundwater.
Yeah, so again, the Tomorrow-Waupaca River Watershed basically runs along the east side of Portage County, east of Stevens Point a little bit, and then runs south and touches, it's almost like a boot shape to it. The heel of the boot touches into Waupaca County to the south, and then it moves to the east into Waupaca County. So it's a pretty sizable watershed. Biggest challenge with the watershed, and I'm just going to read this from the DNR. It says the greatest threat to water quality is excessive amounts of nutrients entering the groundwater. So a little bit more detail. 95% of the watershed is highly susceptible to groundwater contamination due to highly permeable soils, geology, and other physical resources. So as a result, probably our biggest challenge as far as water quality is nitrates leaching into the groundwater, as it says in that description. We have very sandy soils, sandy to mostly sandy loams, not even the loamy or loamy sands, I should say, not so much. We've got some sandy loams in the watershed area as well. So that's the big concern. You know, we don't have to worry too much about runoff in this watershed. Everything seeps down. So again, the challenge that goes along with that. So
yeah, thanks, Ken. So Matt, translating that to the actual work on the land, let's just start with a little info about your farm and the practices you use on that soil and your cropping strategy. I guess, how did soil health become a focus as you built your operation?
I guess, well, do you want me to start in the beginning on how we started all this chaos? Okay.
Sure.
So I started farming when I was 14. A friend of mine had a patch of land that they weren't using next to their apple orchard, and his family let me farm that. And well, him and I did together, to be honest with you. So that was a start with just a couple acres and a Farmall B and Farmall C tractor, I guess. And that was 24 years ago. And now today we're 1,600 acres and 150 miles north of where that started. So originally I was from the Whitewater area in southeast Wisconsin. But we grow field corn, sweet corn if the contracts are good, which this year I didn't think there were nothing to write home about. Soybeans, rye, wheat, alfalfa hay, canning peas, again, if it fits our rotation and stuff like that. I'm trying to think what else we grow, but we grow several crops. It seems like we're always planting or harvesting or taking care of something different. And then I also raise Holstein steers in a confinement barn. And then my wife has a cow-calf operation that we rotationally graze. That's part of the reason why I'm sitting in a tractor instead of the office this morning. We were trying to find a calf in some tall grass. So here you go, I guess. But we kind of got down a soil health path here. Ray Archuleta was in Wisconsin Rapids one time talking about it. And since I was a no-tiller here for probably about 20 years now, it kind of caught my attention on maybe we could be doing a little bit better than just, our normal burn downs and things like that with the no-till. So we started to look more into the soil health and try to bring that into our operation, just to be a little bit more resilient and try to get our costs down too.
Can you talk a little bit about how it did bring your costs down?
Well, it's probably still a work in progress because our soils aren't quite where we want them to be yet. But like the field I'm sitting in right now, it was canning peas last year, so it gave us a good opportunity to plant a multi-species mix in the middle of summer. And it's irrigated ground, so we could pretty much do whatever we wanted to it all summer last year. So it really primed it good to be the field corn crop that it is this year. So this particular farm, since it was peas and we were able to grow that legume crop or cover crop, hopefully we'll be able to credit some of that nitrogen towards the next year's corn crop. And also something else that's kind of unique on this farm, which I guess it's fairly common in our area, is the high nitrates in the groundwater. So basically I kind of look at this corn crop as like a water filter before the water goes past the roots and back into the well. So hopefully the corn here will grab some of that nitrogen that is in the groundwater already and filter it out and use it towards the next crop. We did a study out here for a few years on this particular farm. And to be honest, when they started the study, I thought, well, this will be a joke. They're not going to find enough in there to make it worthwhile. But I believe it's 50 units of nitrogen they actually found in the groundwater for the whole growing season worth of irrigating. So it was significant. And now we're just using that to credit towards the crops that we're growing.
Mm-hmm. Are people skeptical when you say that your soil health work and the way you farm is actually less costly, more cost effective than not doing it?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, this spring, just the variables that we were throwing, I guess the cold spring to start out with, and then this freeze lately, and it's even testing me a little bit because the guys that did tillage, it's kind of the Band-Aid that fixes everything and it makes everything go away for the short term, but long term, I think there's bigger complications that come with it. Where like I've got one farm, I side dressed it yesterday. I just could not believe the difference between where I ran out of rice seed and I had corn planted in there. That the stand was just terrible in the rye for some reason, and I got to go back and figure out why. I try to learn from these issues instead of just writing it off and saying, "Well, I'm never doing that again," because I don't know why that did happen. I really can't figure it out without having to do some more investigation on it.
Okay.
Oh, and Matt, if I might inquire a little bit further, if you don't mind, Nancy.
Sure.
So the other thing that you didn't mention, trips over the field, how has that changed? You know, I mean, by you doing no-till versus full tillage, that sort of thing.
What was that? I guess I missed the first part of your question.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering how what you felt about, you know, when you're doing no-till, how has that saved you on trips over the field? You know,
Oh,
any
sure.
ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. I'm kind of the chief cook, bottle washer, or whatever they call it, where I'm doing 95% of the work here on the farm. And with 1,600 acres, it gets to be quite a handful, I guess, trying to do everything at once. But you know, there's people that are maybe a third of our size that just can't understand how I can get this much work done. Well, if I can pull in with a 40-foot planter and knock out 80 acres one night and a sprayer to do a burn down later and stuff like that, we can get a whole lot of stuff done versus doing a whole bunch of tillage with 2, 3, 4, 5 asses in some cases on some of these vegetable fields. And then here comes a rock picker because you just dug up a whole bunch of rocks. And, you know, it's really kind of something else how much time it's saved us on that end.
Thanks, Matt. When did you start seeing the connection between what happens on the land and what happens in the water, Matt? And what made you think about it?
Well, I guess what kind of kicked it off, one, John Aaron was running the group on the other side of the river, the farmers or friends of the Mill Creek, or I'm sorry, what was that, Ken? The
farmers,
I messed
right?
his name up. Yeah, farmers of Mill Creek. So I thought that was good, the things that he was doing over there. And then I went to Dodge County's event. Tony Pyrick does a great job with that group, and Marty down there. So I thought, well, geez, with the nitrate issue that we've got in our groundwater, maybe this is something that we need to concentrate on. And like in our case, our groundwater on our own farm is high enough that we probably shouldn't be drinking it. And I thought, well, that's going to be pretty unacceptable if I just sit here and point fingers and stuff and we don't get anywhere. So we got to start looking at soil as more than just a media that kind of holds a plant upright so we can harvest it, right? And we got to start using it like the filter that it can be. And, you know, there's a whole lot of things that we can be doing better to help improve our situation. And it's certainly not going to get better overnight. But there's certainly things that we can do to help slow down the issues and maybe reverse it in some cases.
Mm-hmm. When you went to those two events, what did you see in John Aaron and Tony and their neighbors that motivated you to start the group itself? I
Sure.
assume to do without starting a group. So something must have piqued your interest.
Yeah, I think the biggest comment that I guess I walked away from out of that meeting with John's group is Rick from the Packers group. You know, he made the comment that farmers are the solution instead of the problem. And compared to the, I guess I'll call them angry neighbors that we had in our area, we're fighting, well, I shouldn't say fighting, working on these groundwater issues. It seemed like his group, they were working together and trying to come up with a solution, where ours, we're still in the phase of pointing fingers and everybody's mad at each other and not using all their fingers when they're waving and all that kind of stuff yet. And I thought, you know, this is a good way that maybe we can bring opposite sides together, that hopefully we can get to the same common goal. Because at the end of the day, who doesn't want clean water, right?
Do you remember specifically what they were doing at that event that brought people together to hear each other differently?
I can't say for sure, because I think they were doing a lot of work before that event happened, but that was the one where Ray Archuleta came in and stuff like that. And I guess I'll back up a little bit too, that the county seemed to be a lot more involved than what we might be dealing with here. Ken's been great. I don't have an issue with that, but Wood County seems to have really stepped up and tried to be part of the solution where we might not have as much participation on the county level here.
Okay. Before you started the group, I imagine you thought about it for a while, and I'm wondering, what did you stop and think hard about? What did you think might be obstacles, or did you have to let go of any worries or apprehensions before just saying, we're going to start this group?
Well, probably the big one is we're kind of that size now where trying to find land isn't as big of an issue, but being kind of the new guy on the block, even though I've been here for 15 years, I guess, in this area, trying to get land and being a little bit different like that, I guess I was concerned that maybe this will have people say, oh, hey, right into that guy, he's a environmental freak or something like that. And I guess that was a concern of mine, but honestly, it seems to have had the opposite effect where people have been attracted to rent me land because we are more conscious about some of this stuff. So that was probably the big one. Also, I'm a seed dealer too, and I guess I was kind of worried what fellow farmers would think if I'm sitting here kind of bucking the fray, going a different route than what many of them are doing too. So at the end of the day, we gotta pay our bills too, I guess. So hopefully we're not upsetting anybody that much, but we're trying to make a difference anyway, either way. So
sure. So have you seen any of those, has it gone fairly smoothly, or have you seen any of those fears realized?
Not really. I guess I don't have many haters that I can think of. So I don't know. And if I do, I guess I don't know about them or what I did wrong, but I don't know. I find people, if people are running their mouth, typically they don't know you anyway. So I guess I'm not that worried about it.
Sure. So Ken and Matt, will you tell us a little bit about what the group has done since it was founded? What kind of events have you had? What kind of outreach?
Yeah, so the group, initially, because it was new, they decided to do a kickoff meeting in spring, and that's kind of stuck. We've been doing that every 3 years since that time, and that's worked out well, basically to introduce folks to the group, get new folks involved, and also talk about the opportunities going forward and the challenges as we go along. So that's been good. I don't know, Matt, you want to talk about a couple of the field days that we had? And
sure. So I guess to go along with the kickoff meetings that we have in the spring, we have summer field days where we're trying to show things in crop. Maybe we're doing interseeding, or maybe it's a multi-species cover crop that we're looking at. And try to get people out in the field to see things in real life, I guess, if that's a way to describe it or whatever. And that's gone pretty good too. This time of year, it seems like next week we're always going to be caught up, so you got time, and it doesn't really happen that way. But even with that, it seems like we still get a pretty good turnout on the summer events too, with a couple dozen people usually showing up. So we're pretty content on that too.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing people show up who may not have been involved before?
Yeah, yep, I'd say that.
How did the two of you connect on this? And Ken, would you tell us a little bit about your role and how that plays out?
yeah, so I guess, initially, hard to say, I guess, but the county had been having discussions about groundwater challenges and nutrient management and other things. And we had a citizen group that was, should I say, rather angry or frustrated with the farming community in general. And so, I mean, I attended those meetings to provide education and support for, you know, what kind of things farmers are doing and what they can do. You know, Matt was at one or two of those meetings and a couple of other folks. And so eventually he just reached out to me and he says, well, you know, what can we do? How can we get something going like this? Because again, with the Mill Creek Watershed Group, we had been going for 2 years, I think it was, by the time the Tomorrow River Group got started. And Matt was fully aware of that as he was talking about coming to some of those events. So I think that's where we kind of got together and with an understanding of some of the challenges and some of the possibilities. So as far as how my support, of course, I have the long arm of the UW-Madison and the research folks there for bringing in, you know, researchers and just folks to presenters at some of the meetings. I help with that when our group gets together to talk about what we want to see and what the options are, what we want to bring in for educational purposes and that sort of thing. I'm always there with that. So again, what Extension does, we provide research and educational resources, and that's pretty much been my role. I helped with writing the grant and that sort initially, you know, because I had some experience with the Mill Creek Group. And so that's what I do. I do also help with some of the managing the cost share project. So.
Ken, you mentioned a grant, and I know that there are people in other states who do not have the farmer-led grant program that Wisconsin has and might be interested in knowing how that's made a difference for this group. Matt certainly weighed in there too, and also other groups you work with. What does it make possible?
Pretty much everything, I would say. You know, you got to have money to do these sorts of things. I mean, you could do a field day on the cheap, but if you haven't got any money for food, you know, food's a good incentive to show up and learn something. So the grant opportunity, again, it's through the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. So 2016 was the first year they had that opportunity available. Started out pretty low. I mean, they did limit the request to $40,000 per group. I don't remember what the total amount they had. I think it was only like $250,000. That has really gotten the attention of legislators and supporters in DATCAP, and so it's really mushroomed into, I think, this coming year, or right now, maybe we have $750,000 available for that. Again, it's a producer-led watershed project or farmer-led watershed. It's all about farmers taking the lead and working on some of the challenges and learning from each other and sharing what they know. And so that's been the focus of these watershed groups all along. And you know, you can't say enough about the availability of those dollars for that sort of thing. And I don't know if Matt wants to comment about, you know, some of our cost share opportunities and how that fits into the whole picture. So.
Sure, we've used the majority of the funding usually goes for the cost share opportunities, like somebody that's trying no-till for the first time, or maybe they're doing interseeding for the first time, or something like that. And that's where the vast majority of that money goes. Probably I don't know, it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing. Once you get to that point, it's like, well, do you want to keep incentivizing people to do the same exact practice every year after they become comfortable with it? Or do you want to push people out of their boundary a little bit, but then you might not get the participation either anymore? And it's always a, 6 of one, half dozen the other once you get to that point.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the group as a whole has tried to do that, as Matt was saying, kind of change things. In particular, this year, we still have the no-till cost share incentives, but we've got fewer acres that we're cost sharing that way. Cover crops, single species cover crops. We've kind of went to focusing on some of the more complex opportunities, I guess. Still focusing on encouraging farmers to try multi-species cover crops. We've also put in there an opportunity for cost share on aerial seeding of cover crops in the fall, prior to harvesting crops. That was new for this year, and we're encouraging farmers to do manure analysis. That's been a hard sell for some reason. I don't know. I think when it comes to manure hauling time, it's just got to happen, and where's the time to do that? But and also some opportunities for them for cost sharing of doing pre-sidedress nitrate testing and that sort. So we're trying to move from the straight just no-till cost share. We that's down to where a lot of that's going to be focused on new folks or new ground versus folks that have been no-tilling in the past. So it's kind of how it's evolved over the time. So, and then the interseeding, again, that was 2 years ago. We did a field day on that, which was pretty cool. And actually, my background shows the interseeded cover crop in that cornfield that was part of our field tour that summer.
Thank you. Beyond the events and the obvious conversations that need to happen to work with the grant money, create priorities, distribute, how is this group that you started cultivating conversation outside of your meetings? Do you see a change, Matt?
Definitely.
I guess our neighbors talking to neighbors or saying how'd you do that, or.
Yep, I would absolutely agree that that's going on. I had a gentleman call my house the other day, which we never answer the landline or even check the voicemail because it's never anything important usually, but this time it was. And he was wondering about carbon markets, which I don't know much about, and I guess I don't need to get into it, but I would never have a phone call like that in the past. So I think, I don't know, being more on a peer level, farmers are more comfortable reaching out and talking to other farmers about stuff like that versus, calling a company, which of course everything they've got's the greatest, or maybe there's somebody that, their university might have, but maybe they're not quite up to speed on it too or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've added, or I should say I shouldn't say we, I had nothing to do with it, but the Facebook page for the Farmers for Tomorrow River Watershed. So, that's been helpful too in getting the word out to folks, when events are happening and when it's time to put in their requests and provide their documentation for cost share practices that they're eligible for. So that's an addition that the group has made that I think is proved to be beneficial for the outreach side of things.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any actual like collaborative seeding, paying for seed together, or the aerial planting or anything like that? Sometimes we hear that evolves out of these groups.
Sure. Yeah, our group hasn't done that, but I do know of others that have.
Um, Matt, I understand that your farm is also part of the Upper Fox Wolf Demonstration Farm Network. And I'm wondering how the two things, the Farmers for Tomorrow group and that project kind of weave together and build that conversation too. Had you started the other project before Farmers for Tomorrow?
No, the Upper Fox demo, I don't remember the second or third year, it might be the third year in it. So that's, I guess a lot of things we're doing are very similar. Probably the most difficult part of doing all these outside the box, I guess if you want to call it, things, are trying to find somebody with experience that's done it. And the Demo Farms Network has helped with that to some degree. But still, sometimes you feel like you're a little bit on an island, trying to do some of these different things. And I don't know, it seems like, especially this year, we had about 3 things going on at once that just stumped me, and I'm not sure who to reach out to on advice for it.
Yeah. Ken, can you speak to that a little bit too? And just organizationally, how does somebody navigate these things and take advantage of all the opportunities that are there without going nuts?
Well, I think part of it is if you're new to the conservation practices, we certainly don't encourage you to go whole hog, and convert the whole farm, especially if you're talking about adding cover crops. There's a learning curve with both no-till and cover crops, and I'm sure we've had folks that have just says, okay, I'm just going to do it, and they took the dive, and maybe that's Matt's approach. I'm not sure. Cover crops, I know he's been a little more gradual at working those into the system, but again, it's important to have those lines of communication between farmers that have experience with it, because that's just so helpful. Opportunities to ask questions, and then having the link to the other resources like UW-Madison Extension and Research. We've been working with Matt on the nitrogen rate study on for 4 years now. That's a statewide research project, and so we're looking at different rates of nitrogen, starting at between, 0 is the control, and then we've got 40, 80, 120, 160, and 200 pounds of N per acre out there. And so we've had research plots on Matt's farm for 4 years. This is going on the 4th year right now. So those kind of things, and again, the opportunities then are to share that, and I don't think I can emphasize enough the importance of local. What's going on in your backyard versus, that's small research plots at UW-Madison. It's at the Arlington Research Station, which has probably the ultimate soil, in Wisconsin. It's a nice loam soil that you can grow anything on there. If you mess that up, it's you got to question how you're doing there. But in some of these other soils, it's not that easy. So it's just important, I think, to maintain these farmer groups and having these conversations so that farmers themselves can be encouraged more to share what they learn and what they know. But there's a certain amount of that getting out there and just trying stuff and just doing it. I think the other part is the importance of attitude. It's and Matt has the right attitude that, some I think might not have gone right, but I just need to figure out why. And, he's not just throwing in the towel and saying, well, I guess that didn't work. We heard some of that initially on when we were getting the group. I think one of the very first meetings we had a field day, and we had some farmers out there, and one farmer says, well, no-till doesn't work here. I tried it and it doesn't work. And now that was probably 15 years ago. And So the question is, did you give it a serious try, and how did that all come about? But again, attitude is huge in that, you talk to farmers that are of the mindset that I'm going to make it work because this is the right thing to do, and it will work eventually, and sometimes you take a hit, and sometimes, things go well. Just like Matt was alluding to, we saw with his heavy cover crop fields, and we had this late frost. I think they took the biggest hit as far as frost damage on corn, and the ones that had that were no-tilled into a cover crop. That research plot that we have on his farm, that corn, I was out there after the frost, and it didn't look happy at all. But there was green coming out there, and it's coming back. But those kind of things, it's like, well, it leads you to question. So, oh my gosh, what did I do now? But it's all, everybody's in it and needing to learn from each other. So again, the importance of these farmer-led groups are so important as far as I see it. I don't know, Matt, maybe he's got some further thoughts on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess, since the late frost here is fresh in everybody's minds, I'll just make a comment on that. I guess when that happened and we saw like the cover crop no-till fields took it a little bit harder than the rest of them this year, I just thought, oh my God, we're going to have the foam blown up and everybody's going to get the moldboard plow out and all this stuff. And maybe some will, but if you want things to work, they're going to work. You just got to figure out how to make it happen. And if this year we had a frost that was more damaging to stuff because of that cover that insulated soil, so it couldn't radiate the heat up and make it 1 or 2 degree difference. I guess that is what it is. But on the same time, every year we've got big time erosion and windstorms up here in the central sands because there's no residue cover whatsoever, and many put like 0 value on that, and that just blows my mind. I mean, I don't. Well, I live in the central sands, but the big vegetable area is probably west of me 15 miles, and every spring there's 2 or 3 days where I can look off to the west and you see the dust cloud rolling. It's just like 1930s. I mean, my God, it's 2021 and we haven't figured out anything better than that yet. It blows my mind.
Thank you. And it's time for us to move on to our small groups, but very quickly, I'd just like to ask both of you, what makes you really excited about what you're doing right now? Just one thing.
Oh, hopefully I make it a better place for my son that's going to be 9 here this weekend. He's got to have someplace decent to live too at some point.
I'm just excited about the basically kind of the new ways of farming. It adds some interest to. I grew up on a dairy farm. I've been farming all my life until the last 30 years, I guess. So that's things have changed, but. Anyways, it's just exciting to see some of the new things and the interseeding and that sort of thing. That's like, wow, when I was out there farming years ago, I hadn't even thought about that as an opportunity. And back in my mind, I almost wish I had some acres that I could just play around with just for fun, just to learn. I mean, I think it adds a little extra interest to that whole farming process. Okay. And as an educator, I enjoy that. It makes my job fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, both of you. Now, as we move to the breakout groups, you will automatically be put into small groups. You don't have to do anything. Amy is going to make some assignments for group leaders. You'll be in the discussion about 10 minutes. And the question, please write this down because you won't be able to see it in the chat. It will be there now, but you won't be able to see it when you're in the small group. The question to talk about is, what does leadership look like among neighbors in a local initiative? Does a leader need to be an extrovert, an organizer, a promoter? Or what qualities actually motivate this shift that we're all talking about? We'll take a few minutes now just to share what you talked about. The question was, what does leadership look like among neighbors in an initiative like this? And what qualities does a leader have that motivate others?
All right, first up for the breakout rooms is Dean.
Yeah, this is Dean. Yeah, I've got to go to another meeting here in about 2 minutes. So Sherry volunteered to take the minutes, or the comments, and I'll let her go ahead. And
Okay, okay, sounds
I
good.
apologize. So I'm going to drop off now. Good luck to everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dean. So we talked about how that leadership can kind of come in different packages. It's not so much about being an introvert or an extrovert. You can make those qualities work either way. You kind of have to figure out what works within your small community. Matt was in our small group, and so we picked his brain a little bit, and he thought that one of the most important skills to have for success was organization skills and scheduling, not just with people and details, but even working through cost share and grants, that attention to detail being really important. I asked him if he thought that you needed to be a risk taker. And he said that in some form, at least to the extent that you're willing to step out of your comfort zone and try something new. And then he talked a little bit about how you should be ready and okay with the fact that you're going to get frustrated because things may move slowly and there may be hurdles, and other producers may come along and then again they may not. So just kind of being ready to take the slow road. Those are kind of our highlights.
Awesome, thanks, Sherry. Next up is Andrea.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on some similar topics. One thing we had discussed was as a leader, you kind of have to be willing to make some risks and take some chances. Be prepared to fail. You're going to be trying new things, and you're going to be acting as a leader in trying new things. So you got to be willing to just go out, do it, and see what happens and learn from that experience and share those experiences so that other people can learn from them as well.
Awesome, perfect.
If I might add to that, another thing that was brought up was the importance to find the right people that's really, really important, to find the right person that in some respects, my take is that, they need to be respected individuals that for a reason that they're whatever it may be, but the importance of that right person makes all the difference in the world in some cases.
Awesome, thank you guys for sharing. Last but not least is David Zettner.
Well, we barely got Bray and I past introduction. So I can just share with you that maybe being the project director for an NGO, a nonprofit group that has a long history in ag policy and ag conservation, an organization that's 100 years old next year, and very active in the upper Midwest historically. Leadership is, in my opinion, on our behalf, is knowing when to lead, when to follow, being very respectful that we are not the farm experts, being very honest that our mission is one of clean water, healthy soils, resilient landscapes and watersheds, but that there's a great need in our country to connect the rural and the urban community, and to not assume all farmers think the same way. And that has been in the early phases of this project that we have. Our dream is to be able to use the human dimension to facilitate connections and the kind of wonderful problem solving that Matt and Ken have been doing with the farmer-led peer groups. In fact, one of our partners in Minnesota is the Minnesota Soil Health Association, a farmer-led peer group that is working with us on the attempt to develop a pilot in Redwood County, along with the Redwood County SWCD. So we're kind of feeling our way and trying to build bridges. So it may be a little different kind of leadership. I've gone on too far, but that's the answer I can give you.
Thank you.
Good answer. That's all, Nancy.
Okay. My husband often says that he leads from behind. And that's what I heard you say just now, Dave, that listening is so important and that there are so many ways to lead that don't put an individual in the middle. Though we have to be ready for that at times, even if we aren't comfortable with that. So I thank you all for those reflections. This idea of leadership and how we step forward when we don't know what to do is why this all started. And so I really value hearing about, hearing the things you've shared and that this group continues to share. At this point, Heidi, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am, Nancy.
All right. I know you're really, truly in the field. So I just wondered if, having heard this discussion, are there any resources you want to mention, or did anything come to mind that fishers and farmers can offer that you think is important to share right now?
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think if folks are interested in funding resources, they can go to our website and learn about the projects we funded. If they're interested in what kind of projects we fund, or learning more about what other groups have done, they can find more of that on our fishersandfarmers.org is our website. Or they can reach out to me at my website, Heidi_Quayler@fws.gov. You can feel free to also call me at 608-783-8417. And I would love to have more of these discussions at a later time. It's really hot today, but I'm always interested in learning what folks are doing. And it's been an awesome webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It was wonderful to hear.
Thank you, Heidi. Okay, now at this point, it's your opportunity, guests, to ask Matt and Ken any questions you have. I encourage you to go to the top right of your screen and choose the gallery view so you can see everyone at the same time. And we open it to conversation.
You guys are more than welcome to turn your video on, unmute yourself. Like Nancy said, an open, casual conversation.
Right. We find people are very good at just in this format, just taking turns.
I can start. We got a question in the chat. It's a kind of a twofold question. How many participants were there in the peer group? And what is the average size or acreage for each producer?
For our watershed group?
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming, yeah.
Depends on the meeting, but I would say if we have a late turnout, it's a dozen, and usually, I don't know if we might have had 3 dozen at like a winter kickoff meeting or something like that. The average farm size, I would say, is probably on the smaller side. So I don't know, 300 to 500 acres would probably catch most of them. And I guess I would make one comment, kind of on farm size, is I think all of us get a little heartburn when we see the big farms getting more money to do this or that or the other thing. But at the end of the day, if I can change one mind on a 10,000 acre farm versus 1,000 minds on a 10 acre farm or whatever, that's going to make a bigger impact. And I think sometimes you got to step back and realize that sometimes too. So I guess that's kind of the gist of it or whatever.
Matt, this is Dave Zentner, Isaac Wontley, and you broke up a little bit. I really appreciate what you're doing so very much. Are you suggesting that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that it might be more difficult for smaller producers to diversify and to be able to afford it than a 10,000 acre farmer, that there's some policy adjustments? Am I understanding you correctly?
No, not necessarily. I guess what I'm saying is, like, so some people get irritated, like, say, take a CAFO dairy operation, for example, that they've already got cost share money to build a manure pit or whatever from the government, and people get heartburn over that and they're all upset about it. But at the end of the day, if we can change that operator's mind and get improvements over 5,000-10,000 acres or something, that's a good day as far as I'm concerned. And I realize that financially they might be better off, or at least driving by, versus a smaller guy that's struggling. But at the end of the day, we need to have acres changing along with these mines as well.
Thank you.
I have a question for Matt. You mentioned high nitrate levels in your groundwater. What have been the main sources of that nitrate?
I would say just about all of it is probably from agricultural sources. I don't know. Kind of a fun side story is that everybody wants to blame like the golf course or something because they put so much on, and it's like, I technically I shouldn't drink our water, and we do drink bottled water for the most part, but I do drink some out of the faucet every now and then. But I just laugh because I think the closest golf course is like at least 15 miles away. Well, that golf course probably did not contaminate my well. It's probably got something to do with the irrigated fields that are being pushed to high yields up the road. But
okay, you mean crop fertilizer, crop fertilizers?
Yeah.
Is what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And manure, and it's all part of the picture. How big each one plays is hard to say, but yeah, the depending on where you're located, of course there are different sources. If your water is downstream from a municipality that doesn't have sewage treatment, then you've got your own private treatment, mound systems and that sort. They add some to it too, but again, that's all depends on where you are. If you're in the middle of the ag production fields, where it's coming from. It's hard to deny that.
So Ken, what can be done to get people to reduce the amount they're putting on it? I mean, it's getting away from them. The plants aren't using it if it's going into the groundwater, right?
The challenge is exactly. I mean, farmers, and many farmers are doing a good job. They're doing the best they can with the tools that they have. A big challenge is when we get these heavy rains, we might be out there applying the right amount of fertilizer, spoon feeding, but if, and same with applying manure. Manure is a good fertilizer. It's a great fertilizer. So you get it out there, and it starts breaking down, and you get 2 inches of rain on these sandy soils. Any nitrates that are or fertilizer that's in the nitrate form is somewhat free flowing. So that's where, we're working on the conservation efforts of, first of all, having a living crop out there to take up those nitrogen, the nitrates that are out there. It is more and more important, to try to get that out there, year round, so that there are roots out there taking up the free nitrogen that's out there. that's just an absorbing sponge, and why the cover crops become more and more important, so that we're in the off season, we've got a crop growing out there. It's able to take up some of the excess nitrates, but part of it is we're at the mercy of Mother Nature. And as we get these heavier rainfalls, which I mean, if we could tell the farmer that, well, yeah, a week from now, you're going to get 2 inches of rain all at one time, they would back off on applying their, the manure. You could better adjust your fertility programs, but we haven't gotten there yet, so that's just part of the innate challenge that goes along with it. The more we can have growers and farmers using nutrient management planning, it's part of the picture. There's all the tools in the toolbox, and in reality, without being able to control the weather, we're somewhat at the mercy of that to make this work. And so farming on the sands is a challenge in itself, but the more organic matter we can add through less tillage, like Matt's doing, adding cover crops to the picture, can improve this situation over time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I have another question if nobody else. Mill Creek has been mentioned. Is that, now there are lots of Mill Creeks in Wisconsin. Is that a tributary to the Tomorrow River or what?
No, it's the opposite side of the county.
Okay, over toward Wood County, right?
Right. It actually starts out in Wood County at Marshfield and ends up in Stevens Point in the Wisconsin River there. So it travels both counties. And that's more of the bigger challenge there is the phosphorus issues, and algae blooms downstream, because that's a little heavier soil. We haven't got the nitrogen leaching issue there. We're working with runoff and soil movement issues. So, but yet, I mean, from my side of things, both of these these challenges can be attacked with some of the same tools in the toolbox that we have with the reduced tillage, no-till, and adding cover crops into the system. So that's kind of a bonus, but they are really two different watersheds in what the concerns are with them.
It got mentioned twice, and I don't know what was the connection. I don't understand. But
Ray, Farmers of Mill Creek watershed group was started by a farmer named John Aaron and neighbors, and it was one that inspired Matt and has inspired a number of people because they've been quite active. And on that note, back to your comment, Matt, about wanting to involve people who have many acres just to move things along. When I spoke with John Aaron in Mill Creek Watershed most recently, he was almost levitating off the ground because a small decision they made during the pandemic to offer free lunches to families, farm families, to take home and share, that included their newsletter, had prompted some family decisions, intergenerational family decisions to take on projects, no-till soil health projects on their farms. And it was the people who came forward to do that were some of the larger landowners in the area. And he was so excited that happened. And really I don't know that anyone specifically invited those people. They just simply picked up the ball out of their own family discussion. So Matt, that brought me to wonder, as you mentioned that, I was wondering, have you reached out specifically to larger landowners in your area, or do you have thoughts about that?
I haven't, but one of our
thing to do.
I don't know if you want to call it officers or okay. She did, and they've come, well, the one in particular, they've come a few times, but it seems like they kind of come just to check the box, so to speak. You know, like, well, we went, but that said, they did do some rye cover crop after they did their fall manure application, actually before it, and then they used their manure knifing rig in to like injected manure, and then whatever was left grew for rye, which that's not how you do that, but but at least they're trying, I guess, is kind of the effort I saw on that. So I guess that was kind of a good step in the right direction. I would say in general, and not just them, we've got a long way to go. And not that I do everything 100% right either. I kind of got a saying around here, Mother Nature bats last. And once you got to figure it out, she'll change something up and you start all over again.
Right. So I think some of this it must be getting attention for some of the vegetable growers in that that new group. They were part of this last round of grants. The folks focused on the Little Plover River. I don't even know the name of their group, but again, it's right in Portage County, and that's primarily vegetable growers. So, I think the ship is starting to get attention, if nothing else, and in some cases, we're turning some heads and getting people thinking about it, heading in the right direction. But it's a process that's it takes some time. But I like to think that just seeing that that group has applied for grant funding says something about what's going on, and they're feeling that it's worth their time. So.
Another question is something that Matt mentioned. He said using legumes once in a while, and I suppose for nitrogen fixing. So in what form does the nitrogen get fixed that it doesn't add to the nitrates? Could Ken explain that? Or
Probably a better Ken question. Get your soil science hat out.
Yeah. I never understood that.
Well, so when you grow an alfalfa crop, that's a legume, and it does fix its own nitrogen. So we are, and it's not a row crop, so we're naturally applying less nitrogen to the crop to begin with. And so the big addition to the alfalfa, generally speaking, is potash, because it's a heavy user of potash. I mean, it's also, so again, we're not applying as much nitrogen. It can absorb it though. I mean, it's a flexible crop, so it can fix its own, but if you apply some in, it's got a good root system and it can make use of it too. So it's a good crop in that it fixes its own. It requires less nitrogen, still will use nitrogen that's applied, and it's a perennial crop. So we are not replanting every year. So again, the whole deal with having roots in the ground and growing constantly, I mean, that serves that purpose. So when that's in a crop rotation, it does add another aspect to it. But that said, you need to have livestock to have that be part of your rotation.
I would add too that typically organic sources of nitrogen tend to break down slower. So that kind of helps with a big burst compared to like fertilizer or something would have. So, manures and city sludge and legumes, typically they're not all available at once. So that kind of helps with some of that too, in case we do get a rain event.
Right.
So you've harvested the alfalfa or the clover, and then you're going to have another crop on there afterwards, but what's in the roots of the legumes is still there, fixed, right? So then it is, as Matt said, it breaks down slower and is available to the next crop, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So-
but typically there's more nitrogen in the plant matter of it, not the roots. The roots
Okay.
are fixing the nitrogen, but like I guess I don't have a nitrogen thing in front of me to go off of it, but say if you had a knee-high alfalfa crop, there'd be 150 pounds of nitrogen there, assuming a decent stand and everything. But if you cut that off and fed it to your cows or whatever, and you just had the stubble there that was say 3 inches tall, there's, I don't know, 40 units of nitrogen or something maybe. So most of that nitrogen leaves the field if you take the crop off with it.
So in the end, when you terminate the alfalfa crop, you're going to plant, say, corn, follow with corn, which is a good idea to do, because and then we encourage farmers to take a nitrogen credit. There is a nitrogen credit depending on anywhere from 40 to 80 pounds of N per acre, and depending on the soil type, of course, whether that's available to the next crop. So that's why we do try to encourage more farmers to do pre-plant nitrate testing and pre-side dress nitrate testing to see what is available in the soil when you decide how much nitrogen you're going to put on that corn crop, for example. You need to know how much credit you can take. That said, those tests are not reliable for the sandier soils. Hence the big challenge again. The sandy soils change so rapidly that if you were to run that analysis and you get the results back in a matter of 2 days, and you make your decision on what to apply for fertilizer, by that point already, if you had a 1 inch rainfall in between, it's a whole different story again. So it's not a real reliable test for the sandy soils. Anything from loamy sand to sands. Sandy loams are a little bit more predictable as far as using those tests as the basis for making your nitrogen application decisions. But the more we can take credit for those sorts of things, we're applying less commercial fertilizer. It is, as Matt said, it's a slow release fertilizer, which is greatly a benefit on the sandy soils when only a part of it is available. When you get that 2 inch rainfall, we got less leaching going on that way too. So it's an interesting picture.
And then am I right that Matt's situation is no-till? So he's not plowing that legume back down. You're just drilling, say, corn into it. Is that what you do?
Correct.
Great.
Mhm.
And now,
so then
Ken,
it will break down slower too. The root
Right.
system, if you haven't stirred it up and turned it up, it's going to break down. It'll be a slow breakdown, slow release.
Now, Ken, what is the basic resistance of farmers who don't want to do that? What is their reasoning?
Not wanting to do no-till?
Yes.
I think maybe Matt could probably answer that as well, or at least add to it. But part of it is that's not how we've been taught to do it. I mentioned that earlier on farming is a hand-me-down kind of situation. You learn from your grandparents, and that has was kind of starting on his own, but he did still have some ag in his background. But there's a lot of that tradition, and some of the older farmers are just saying, well, no, that's a messy field when you see something out there besides a clean tilled field. The other thing to think about or keep in mind is the fact that this is it's a system that needs more management, I think. When you're doing no-till and cover crops. Conventional till, where you till the field up, turn it into garden soil, it's just less, more reliable.
Eliminate a lot of issues with tillage, basically, or potential issues.
Yeah, you can cover up a lot of sins.
Mhm.
But Matt said he was getting a lot more done more efficiently on his land. How so? Well, you explain.
Well,
I guess.
I don't have, 2 or 3 tillage passes that I gotta hire somebody to sit in another tractor and burn diesel fuel and have another tractor to do it and that kind of stuff. We still do a little bit of tillage because I've got a potato guy in my operation, which, I mean, that's like, you take wherever I am with soil health and it's like the total opposite, but I guess it's a sin I gotta deal with for the time being. So we do have to work the ground there, or if we take over a farm that's, it's really rough and we need to level it out. I mean, I'm not gonna go bouncing over that thing for the rest of my life. It's get it leveled out and be decent. And I've had issues too with, if I don't have good residue distribution behind the combine, no-tilling alfalfa. And this year we had to work a little bit of ground because of that for new seeding, because little bitty seeds don't tolerate, very much difference in seed depth and stuff like that. But that's operator, that's my fault. I didn't have the straw chopper set right in the combine last year and didn't realize it until I went to go switch to corn, and here it's already in low range already. So that's my fault.
Matt, one of the things that I've often heard come up in conversations between farmers and non-farmers is a lack of understanding about the technology and the tools, that how different it is between tillage and no tillage, and the expense involved. Back to the question about the ease of adoption. Could you talk just a little bit about what that involves? If you're regularly tilling and you say, I'm going to go no till, what does that mean?
Well, probably the biggest thing is you better have your planter tuned up right, because anything that you don't have either in top-notch shape or down pressure isn't right, or residue clearing is an issue or something like that. I mean, it's going to show up night and day versus tillage. So that's a big one. And I guess I got a few friends around here that also do no-till, so we got to look across the fence and laugh at our neighbors. But one of the big jokes is, it's like, somebody thinks nothing is spending $65,000-$80,000 on a brand new disc. I mean, that's just what you have to do. But boy, putting $500 per row for planter attachments on there to do a better job planting, oh geez, we can't do that. Well, that $500 a row planter attachment that you have on there, you could eliminate the disc. And it's just kind of what Ken says. It's back to what you're used to. It just is what it is. But technology wise, I would say a lot of that's overlap too, from tillage or not. Tractor I'm sitting in here, it's got auto steer, and it can map where I'm putting nutrients and change how much seed I'm putting down depending on where I'm at in the field and that kind of stuff. And then I'll use the same monitor to do yield monitoring later, just to have maps, and then I can kind of fine tune our fertility to what our yields typically are.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Jim, Ray?
Oh, well, I'm full of them. I hate to hog the show here, but
we probably have time for one more short.
Ask Ken again about educating landowners. And Matt mentions people with really big farms. Now, haven't those people gone to college in Madison or another ag school? Most of them. And aren't they going to pick up the right stuff there that we're talking about? Or are the professors behind the times?
It all depends on what they're focusing on. Some of the bigger operators, they go for farm management business classes versus when you get that large, but some of them they hire their own agronomists when you're talking 5,000-8,000 cow operations. They have their own agronomists, or they rely on the co-op to do it. So it depends. So level of education, hard to say. You know, what classes they've taken in you know, and a lot of them have been through the School of Hard Knocks, and that's how you got there.
Well, and I guess I'll echo some of that too. That just because you go to college doesn't necessarily mean you know what you're doing either. I guess. And I went to Madison. I went the short course route, which is basically, you know, the meat and potatoes without all the other stuff that you got to take to get a degree. But I didn't recall at that time, which would have been, you know, around the turn of this, you know, early 2000s here, of a lot of soil health. I mean, basically the only thing about soil health I was taught at UW-Madison was like, well, you probably shouldn't run a disc gripper every single year. That's not great. But that's kind of where that was. And even though we do have some very good researchers in certain departments down at UW, a lot of the times, if we want to do a study on, you know, this cover crop mix, I might be able to have 1 or 2 years worth of data on my own farm by just doing it myself, versus by the time they put together a grant proposal and then take it to whoever they need to get the grant money from, and then, oh, we got to do this and replicate it 97 times and whatever. And then as soon as they do come out with it, well, then, you know, you got the guy in the corner, well, that you didn't do that right, and that's junk data and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I think you're better off doing some of this stuff on your own farm, I guess, as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of it they're just behind the times on, you know, kind of a little late coming to the table a little bit, dare I say, the organization that I work for. But you know, the doing more work with no-till cover crops in combination, you know, you can get more going to the National No-Till Conference and learning from these farmers that have been doing it for years than what you can pull out of some of the universities, just simply because they've been doing it for such a long time. You know, it's just how it is.
Will they go to those conferences though?
Some of them
got to get more of them. So what, you know, Ken, what you and Heidi and Nancy are doing really counts if it can be spread far enough. That's the thing. Yeah.
I think that's a great place for us to end. And I would agree that I mean, everything Fishers and Farmers represents is that this is a complex environment. The soils are different, the conditions are different in every place. The social conditions are different. What people inherited socially and physically are different. And somehow the real learning and evolution comes when we actually listen to each other about the real questions in a place, you know, locally. So Matt, I really want to lift up the work you've done and thank you for that. And Ken, really thank you for being here and for all the work you're doing to support those local conversations and the work. It's work, it's real work. And we know that. And we also know and see, because of the work we're doing, that it is catching and people are noticing their neighbors and it is spreading. So more power to everyone in this big and important effort. Before we part, I just want to say that next month's Boots on the Ground will feature the 7 Mile Creek Watershed Partnership in Minnesota. It's a small watershed that has been studied a great deal over time and has had some interesting social evolutions, I guess. And they did some thoughtful new thinking took some time over the pandemic to really look at how to go forward next. So some of the people involved in that watershed were going to be with us next month. That's on July 15th. And this Saturday, be sure you tune in to hear our Fishers and Farmers Neighbor to Neighbor radio program on the Farm 97.7 and live streamed from the website. This weekend, the program is with Becky Taylor, who's from Livingston County, Illinois. She's a conservation technician who leads learning circles for women landowners who have not actively farmed. And our other guest will be the national lead for spreading that kind of work and effort to support women landowners and improve conservation. So thank you so much, Matt and Ken. We so appreciate you. And we hope you'll all come back and keep asking questions and calling on each other for growth and learning. So thank you. We'll see you next month.